Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending where you are joining us from today. My name is Artak Ayunts. I am the global politics teacher at UWC Dilijan. And today I will be speaking about Armenia, the host country for the students that we are welcoming every year at UWC Dilijan. Thank you very much for your interest and for joining us. And let me just start my speech today, which will last about 20-25 minutes. And then we will have another 20-25 minutes for questions and answers, if there are any. Okay, so Armenia is a landlocked country located on the crossroads of Europe and Asia in the Caucasus region. It is bordered by Turkey to the west, Georgia to the north, Azerbaijan to the east, and Iran to the south. Yerevan is the capital, largest city, and the financial center. There is about 33 million people currently living in Armenia, and the overwhelming majority of population are Armenians, Christians, and the main religious denominations is Armenian Apostolic Church. It is a combination of Catholic and Orthodox traditions in Christianity. The largest ethnic minority is Yazidis, which make about 2% of population, and there are also Russians, Ukrainians, Assyrians, Greeks, Jews, and other smaller ethnicities in Armenia. In total, they make up only about 4 to 5% of the total population. Therefore, we can say that Armenia is largely a monoethnic country. Well, recently there has been also an influx of Russian migrants to Armenia because of the war in Ukraine. According to the official Armenian estimates, there are about 40,000 Russians currently living in Armenia. But this may be a temporary destination, although their role in economy in Armenia cannot be underestimated. Armenia is a very young parliamentary democracy. During the first 25 years of independence, which Armenia gained after the demise of Soviet Union in 1991, Armenia was a semi-presidential republic resembling French structure of governance. However, the ruling party initiated a reform in the mid-2010s, and eventually our constitution was modified. A new system of governance was introduced, the parliamentary republic. The head of the state is the prime minister, and the key legislative body, where the PM is also elected, is the National Assembly, our parliament. Just for your information, yesterday we were celebrating Armenia's Independence Day, which is dated back to 1991, like I said, in September 21st. And incidentally, that is also the International Day of Peace, which we were also celebrating yesterday in our campus. So in 2018, during the process of transition from one political system to another, Armenians stood up for their rights and started mass protests against the authoritarian regime, which was ruling Armenia for the past 20 years, and achieved change of power by non-violent revolution, which was later labeled as Velvet Revolution. Our current prime minister was the key figure behind the revolution and has remained in power since then, even despite one major war initiated by Azerbaijan, and when Armenia was defeated back in 2020, 2 years ago, and also further cycles of violent escalations and hostilities initiated by Azerbaijan and supported by Turkey since 2020. The very recent escalation took place about a week ago, 10 days ago, which took the lives of more than 200 servicemen and civilians in Armenia. But as a means to resolve domestic turbulence and political volatility in the aftermath of the war in the late 2020s, elections were held last year, and in the spring, in May last year, the ruling party confirmed its legitimacy, receiving 54% of total votes. This was a huge confidence vote for the ruling party and the society in the post-war crisis. And Armenians were able to peacefully and democratically deal with the turbulence. Just for your information, how fair these elections were, the OSCE observation mission made a statement after the elections saying that in Armenia, international standards were met of the elections, of the voting process, and it was described as only marred by increasingly inflammatory rhetoric, but overall, the election process and the day of voting was positive overall. Moreover, the defeated parties indicated certain flaws and fraud, but overall acknowledged their defeat. So this once again proves that how important the democratic practices for the Armenian society and government since the change of power in 2018 have been. And to be honest, the acknowledgement by the defeated parties, political parties, of the results of the elections is not something that has always been the case in Armenia, because usually after the elections in the post-election period, main political parties, defeated political parties, were describing the elections being flawed and fraudulent. However, even in these difficult times of war and thousands of people being killed in the war of 2020, the ruling party was able to legitimately be re-elected and continue remaining in power. Armenia is also a member of the Eurasian Economic Council, an economic structure uniting Russia, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Kyrgyzstan. And Armenia is also part of a Russian-initiated collective security treaty organization with the same countries that I just mentioned, plus Tajikistan. Armenia's eastern and western borders, which you can see on your map, are closed by Azerbaijan because of the war, and Turkey, by Azerbaijan and Turkey in solidarity with Azerbaijan. The only major trade route and access to the seas lies through Georgia, and there is also a smaller border with Iran, which is suitable only for cargo trucks, but there is no railway. And now if we can move to the next map, please, map number 2. Thank you. So Armenia has been witnessing wars and economic hardships since the independence in 1991. We were celebrating, like I said, our Independence Day yesterday. And but we have to remember that since then, Armenia has always been encountering wars and escalations of violence from time to time. The first war with Azerbaijan took place in the early 1990s over the predominantly Armenian populated Nagorno-Karabakh region, which you can see on the map, which in Armenia we call Artsakh, which was part of the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic. But as the glasnost and perestroika were introduced by Gorbachev in late 1980s, which was still the Soviet Union, Armenians of Karabakh demanded to be reunited or returned to Soviet Armenia, because historically Karabakh was always predominantly Armenian populated. The Soviet Union neglected this request and addressed the issue with brutal force. But as the USSR ceased to exist, Armenians continued their fight for the self-determination of the Karabakh Armenians. And after 3 years of war with Azerbaijan, Armenians were able to ensure control over not only Karabakh, but also seven other territories of Azerbaijan surrounding Karabakh. Since then, since 1994, when the first ceasefire agreement was signed by Armenia and Azerbaijan, there were many rounds of negotiations, which unfortunately resulted in no progress toward peaceful resolution of conflict. This was mainly because of zero-sum mentality, when each party to the conflict is reluctant to go for compromises and thinks they can achieve more in future. Not happy with the unfruitful results of mediation by the US, Russia, and France as the co-chairs of the key mediation group, negotiating between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In September 2020, which is 2 years ago, Azerbaijan launched a war against Karabakh, and as a result of the military offensive, which lasted 44 days, regained control of the territories in and around Nagorno-Karabakh, previously occupied by Armenian forces for as long as 26 years after the First Karabakh War. So there was the war in 1992, between 1992 and 1994. Armenia was successful, ensuring its control over Nagorno-Karabakh and 7 territories around Azerbaijan. But in 2020, 2 decades later, Azerbaijan launched a counter-offensive and ensured its own control over Nagorno-Karabakh, most parts of Nagorno-Karabakh, and also territories around it. Well, ceasefire declaration was signed on 10th November in 2020 between the leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, which was brokered and co-signed also by Russia, the main mediator right now in the conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And according to that declaration, a new status quo was established, which this time affirmed Azerbaijani military victory on the battlefield. According to the declaration, Russian peacekeepers were deployed in Karabakh to ensure the security of the remaining Armenian population. And the peacekeepers are also responsible for the security of the Lachin corridor, which lies within the territory of Azerbaijan, connecting Karabakh with Armenia via land. Peacekeeping mission will remain deployed in Karabakh until November 2025, which is 3 years from now, with this term to be automatically extended for subsequent 5 years term, unless either of the parties notifies about its intention to terminate this clause 6 months before the expiration of the current term. So it is widely acknowledged by many in Armenia that the Russian peacekeeping forces are the sole guarantors of the security of Armenians in Karabakh, and for that matter also Armenia, especially along the south and to some extent the eastern and northeastern borders of Armenia. However, Azerbaijan, on the other hand, would actually expect full control of Karabakh and is interested in speeding up the withdrawal process of Russian troops from there. Therefore, top security question right now in Armenia and Karabakh for that matter is what will happen if or when Russians leave Karabakh, and if Azerbaijan refuses to extend the mandate of Russian peacekeeping mission. So it's an open question. We don't know the answer yet, but this is a real security issue for Armenia today, especially the Armenian population living in Artsakh or Karabakh. So Armenia insists that the political settlement of Karabakh conflict and the status of Karabakh is still among the core issues between the two countries. It is evident that Armenia cannot push this through due to the current significant asymmetry in power balance as compared with Azerbaijan. The idea in Armenia is to presumably stick to the narrative of the status and at least keep it on the agenda of Armenia-Azerbaijan normalization process and in the diplomatic communication with the international community. It is also because of this that Azerbaijan waged another brief or limited war just 10 days ago, which lasted about 3 days. And the main desire behind this new violence and war was to push Armenia to make more concessions and forget about any political status for the Armenians living in Karabakh. There were other reasons too, among them gaining control over certain Armenian sovereign territory in the south to connect with their exclave in Nakhichevan. And now we can turn to the third map, our third map, which will indicate what are the core issues right now between Armenia and Azerbaijan and why Azerbaijan launched this another offensive against Armenia, bombing and shelling Armenian settlements, this time inside Armenian territory, internationally recognized sovereign Armenian territory. So according to Azerbaijan, the status quo established as a result of the war 2 years ago should be augmented by peace agreement between the two countries, and that Armenia's only option is to agree to the current reality as the losing party to the war, as the party who was dictated the terms of ceasefire. It is in this declaration where it is pointed out that Azerbaijan is entitled to a road connecting its mainland territory with its exclave Nakhichevan that you can see on the map. And it lies through the Armenian territory of southern territory of Syunik. Azerbaijani interpretation is to have sovereign rights over that passage, while Armenia insists that it should remain sovereign Armenian territory and Azerbaijan is free to cross Armenian territory and travel to Azerbaijan. So in other words, Azerbaijan is pushing to get more Armenian territory, internationally recognized sovereign territory, to be given this passage connecting their main territory with their exclave of Nakhichevan, whereas Armenia is reluctant and is not really willing to give up any sovereign territory in accordance with international law, indicating that Azerbaijan is always free to cross Armenian territory and then eventually end up in Nakhichevan or from Nakhichevan to Azerbaijan. But this territory has to remain Armenian sovereign territory. So there is this misinterpretation of the declaration that was signed by Armenia and Azerbaijan back 2 years ago. And Azerbaijan is interpreting it in favor of itself. Armenia is interpreting in opposite way. Therefore, but given the asymmetry of the military balance, it is clear that Azerbaijan has all the power and military equipment to deal with this issue by force. And from time to time, they're escalating the situation and demanding more concessions from the Armenian side. And therefore, Azerbaijani demands on bombardment of sovereign Armenian territory, as well as the intrusions during the fragile ceasefire, were happening during the last 2 years. This last escalation was not just one-off escalation. There were several other escalations before. And according to official Armenian sources, about 50 square kilometers of Armenian internationally recognized territory is currently under Azerbaijani occupation. And even though Armenia has very limited capacity to resist this aggression, our nation and army stood together to prevent this aggression, further aggression from Azerbaijan, and it was possible to stop this aggression after 3 days of violence 10 days ago. And unfortunately, our military alliance with the above-mentioned Collective Security Treaty Organization is not helping us much, since the key actor there, Russia, does not want to take clear stance in this issue and support one of the sides, even though, according to this treaty, an aggression against one country means aggression to all members of the treaty. For Russia, having influence and leverages on both Armenia and Azerbaijan is important. So in other words, even though we are in a military union and treaty with Russia, we cannot expect much help from Russia because of the balance that Russia wants to have in the relationship with both Armenia and Azerbaijan. So for Russia, even though it is perceived as the key military ally of Armenia among many Armenians now, it is important to understand for Russia, this region is one region of South Caucasus, and it doesn't really matter Armenia, Azerbaijan, or other country will have control to any passage or corridor linking any of the countries. So for them is mostly important, according to the national interest, is mostly important to keep control and influence over its near abroad, regardless of their borders, of their their nations, states, etc., etc. So and because of a complex geopolitical situation, also there have been such incidents also in Armenia and Azerbaijan. And as we know, because of the issues that Russians are experiencing in the war in Ukraine and the military setbacks they are having in Ukraine, this is raising some hopes among Azerbaijan, supported by Turkey, that this is a good opportunity now to dictate further their will and their demands on Armenia, to Armenia, against Armenia, or towards Armenia, and reach more. So the more they can take because of their military military power, the better for them, because now Armenia is not in a condition to be able to resist these demands. Therefore, Armenia is also right now trying to find some solutions elsewhere other than Russia. And interestingly, very recently also the Speaker of the House of Representatives in the United States, the Speaker Nancy Pelosi, visited Armenia, delivering some messages of potential possible support to Armenia if Armenia was eager to get military support or any other support from the United States. So this is a clear message now to fill the possible security gap or influence gap that can happen also in our region because of the retreat of the Russian military in Ukraine. Also, the American Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, invited Armenian and Azerbaijani foreign ministers to visit New York under the auspices of the UN and held a meeting with them, urging them to find peaceful solutions to the conflict rather than resorting to force and war. So these are just the messages that international community, most particularly Americans, are currently urging the two countries to find a solution to the existing conflict. But the situation remains tense in Armenia, and Azerbaijani aggression is not something that is already gone. They still consider the option for taking some territory of Armenia or some building connection to their ex-Nakhichevan and demanding more concessions from Armenia, also by force. So that's also an option on the table. And just recently, yesterday, Azerbaijani president urged Armenia to re-engage in discussions around peace agreement in order to ensure that they won't be using more force. However, there were also messages full of threats that if Armenia doesn't obey Azerbaijani demands, basically giving up some territory to be connected with their exclave Nakhichevan, and also forget about the right of Armenians in Karabakh for self-determination, then they can resort to war. And he also reminded that 2 years ago, they resolved a lot of issues. They liberated, according to their understanding of the situation, several territories and some parts of Karabakh, and they can do the same with Armenia now. If Armenia doesn't agree to the terms suggested by Azerbaijan. And we have to all understand also that Azerbaijan is being backed up by Turkey considerably. And this is another power imbalance from the Armenian perspective, because Armenia does not have a similar ally that could come for help, or at least ensure the balance is preserved, so that there is no rhetoric, there is no warmongering by Azerbaijan against Armenia and against Armenian territory. So just to summarize, maybe there are a lot of processes and developments taking place in Armenia right now. There is this changing Russian image in public perception of Armenians, and because of the reluctance of Russia to support Armenia in the very recent escalation, because of the appeal to CSTO and no action by that treaty, by that union to support Armenia. Currently, Armenia is seriously reconsidering commitment to Russian geopolitical alliance. There are protest demonstrations with the US flags and other Western countries' flags, where people bring into these rallies and they demand change of Armenian foreign policy to withdraw from all the connections and relations we have with Russia. This is going to be a very big challenge for Armenians, for obvious reasons, because of so many connections with Russia, economically, socially, humanitarian issues. So many Armenians also living in Russia, hundreds of thousands, even millions. So this is going to be a challenge for Armenia, on top of the current existing threats, existential threats from Azerbaijan and Turkey. So in the process of finding solutions to these existential threats, and not finding them in the current frameworks of international norms and international relations, most particularly Russia and CSTO, Armenian government is currently seeking for other alternatives. But the problem is that in this process of finding alternatives, there can be, the existential threat from Azerbaijan and Turkey will continue, unfortunately. And the question is whether Armenia will be able to militarily resist the aggression coming from Azerbaijan. So the best outcome, to just wrap up, the best outcome, in my opinion, for Armenia and Azerbaijan would obviously be activating negotiations over the border issues, the demarcation and delimitation of the Armenian-Azerbaijani eastern border, which was a new border because of the war that happened in 2020. That border was never delimited or demarcated during the Soviet Union's times, obviously, and after the Soviet Union collapsed, there was war, and Armenia was controlling some of the territories around the current border, Armenia-Azerbaijani border. So there was no opportunity before to deal with that border. So there is no clear line where that border lies. So the border delimitation and demarcation is very important from Armenian and Azerbaijani perspective, and this should be conducted in order to ensure the borders are secure, and in any further escalation of violence by Azerbaijan, it will be pretty much clear that they are violating Armenian territorial integrity and internationally recognized sovereign territory. Huge efforts will be required to work on this, and for 2 years now, both sides haven't been able to do so. But if succeeded, this will be a significant step forward toward more secure future. And most importantly, we all should understand that we are destined to build normal relations with our neighbors in Azerbaijan and Turkey to reach peace and development. Our core values also at the school here at UWC. To do this, Armenia should enhance its security and defense systems, alliances to prevent future war, and to work closely with Azerbaijan and Turkey to start normalization process. by opening communication channels, by urging them to open communication channels and boosting economic cooperation. So in other words, in order to reach peace in the region, it is clearly, there have been several messages now from Azerbaijan when they resorted to violence and war, that we need to get some equal support and equal military build-up to resist, to prevent, in other words, to prevent Azerbaijani aggression. Because if they see that Armenia is not powerful enough, is weak, then they have already indicated that they are not shy of using force to achieve their aims. So in order to achieve peace is to build our own defense systems and alliances. But obviously, on the other hand, there should be also a process of normalization with the neighbors, because we will be living next to each other in the future. So the threat of war by Azerbaijan is still around. It has not disappeared, unfortunately, and there are many obstacles on the road to peace. But significant efforts are being invested currently by the government of Armenia and the international community to ensure the conflict can be resolved with peaceful means. Again, the threat of war is still there, maybe limited, not an all-out war, because like I said, Azerbaijan considers Armenia as the weak party to the conflict. And also, given the situation in the international relations and how international law can be violated by some countries, intruding in the sovereign territory of others, in the case of Russia and Ukraine, Azerbaijan and Turkey consider this option also open for them. So therefore, our option right now is to build alliances, equip militarily the way that Azerbaijan will prevent any further Azerbaijan aggression, and in the meantime, engage to normalize relations with our neighbors. So I'll probably stop there, and if you have any questions or comments or feedback, I'll be more than happy to respond. Okay, so I see one question already in the chat, which is about, does Armenia have any cultural and business relations with Turkey and Azerbaijan? Well, with Azerbaijan, there are no relations right now, and we are in a condition of basically war. I would probably say no war, no peace as at the moment in the present day, but the threat of war is there, and there are no relations with Azerbaijan whatsoever. And interestingly enough, perhaps this is one of the few, if not only, geographic areas in the world where the populations are exclusively they are not represented in each other's country. So there are no Armenians living in Azerbaijan, no Azeris living in Armenia, and there is no relation between the two of them. If someone wants to, I mean, no one can travel to Azerbaijan from Armenia, and the other way around. With Turkey, we do have relations, and we have even Armenian community living in Turkey, historically living in Turkey. So there are several thousands of Armenians, ethnic Armenians, who consider Turkey as their homeland, because that was also their homeland. So there are many Armenians in Istanbul, many Armenians in the eastern parts of Turkey. And there are relations between Armenia and Turkey. There is no border, land border, because Turkey closed that border in support with Azerbaijan. However, there are flights, regular flights between Armenia and Turkey. So people can travel, people can visit each other countries, people can, engage in dialogue, communication, but there are no diplomatic relations with Turkey. So that's the situation. The relations with Iran, yes, Armenia does have relations with Iran and the common border with Iran. And this is a very crucial border for Armenia, because this is one of the two borders available that are open for Armenia, and that we can access the open seas or make some trade, etc. So the border with Iran is very important. And we do have also historically good relations with Iran. There is also a huge Armenian population living in Iran, about several hundred thousands living also in Iran, historically also. And there are Christians able to practice their Christian religion. So yes, we do have relations with Iran. And actually, interestingly, right now, Iran is also an important key actor in this conflict with Azerbaijan that we have, because Iran is insisting that no borders now can be changed between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And they don't want to lose this small border, their northern border with Armenia, because it is also vital for them to, the south-north as a south-north corridor to reach Russia and other markets. So they have made pretty clear messages to Azerbaijan. They have sent these messages that they will not tolerate any change of the borders between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So yes, we do have pretty positive relations, and our national interests in this particular question seem to overlap, and we can find also some support, at least some symbolic support from Iran. Well, Georgia, again, this is another neighbor of ours to the north that we have great relations with Georgia, historically great relations, have never been in war with Georgia, apart from a very singular few days war back 100 years ago. But I mean, we have very, very good relations, and Georgians value our neighborly relations. And but they also want to be neutral in this situation because they have similarly good relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey. There is a lot of investment in Georgia from Turkey, from Azerbaijan. Major pipelines go through Georgia from Azerbaijan to Turkey and then all over the Europe. So again, Georgia is trying to keep a balanced relationship with both countries. Okay, there is another question. Is it thought that Pelosi's comments here in Armenia were a message from the Biden administration, or is it thought that she might have been freelancing? Well, I think it's hard to say she was freelancing because she's the third person in the United States after the president and vice president. She definitely represents United States interests, and I don't think she was free to, to deliver any message that is in contrast to the US national interest or their foreign policy. So I believe there is a clear understanding in the United States that there is possibly going to be a security and influence gap in the South Caucasus because of the failures that Russia has in Ukraine and because of the possibly deteriorating situation inside Russia, obviously, that we can see all these demonstrations and protests as a result of the new law that they introduced yesterday, the decree by the president for mobilization. So we see a lot of turbulence in Russia, and there are certain setbacks also militarily in Ukraine. So for United States, it's an important time also to reintroduce their presence in the region and become more active because of the importance of this region being on the crossroads of Europe and Asia. So I do think that Pelosi's visit was also served their domestic political issues of the Democrats gaining more support from the Armenian community there. But I mean, if there are some overlaps in the interests of United States and Armenia, then why not to utilize on those interests? What kind of support Armenia would like from the international community? Oh, that's a good question. So the first question we should ask is, what is international community? Are we referring to the UN? Are we referring to the certain powers, major powers in the world that could somehow support Armenia? Like I already said, the United States is trying to indicate at least that there could be some expectations from them, that Armenia can have some can rely on their help should such help be sought by Armenia from the United States. We can also see that some European countries are also being supportive of Armenian cause, like France, and because of also a big Armenian diaspora in France and Armenian community in France. But we also have to understand that international community or major countries like France and Americans are probably will not be able to send troops to fight along with Armenian troops, or support in any other way, also some military support because of the current conditions Armenia in. Like I said, Armenia in this CSTO organization and has very, very close relations with Russia, and it is difficult for Armenia also to acquire weapons and military support from other countries, not only because of its commitment to the Russian-controlled unions and treaties, but also because of the closed borders. It is eventually technically, logistically very, very difficult for Armenia to get any aid or military aid from other countries, because the major borders are closed on both sides, in the east, to the east and to the west. So, and there is the Iranian small border and the Georgian border. So Armenian Prime Minister just recently also mentioned that they are looking for alternative options for military support, other type of support from other countries apart from Russia. But it has been very difficult to get that support. Not also because the fact that there is a blockade of our borders, and technically, logistically, it is hard to acquire necessary military support from other countries. So several other questions. So Nagorno-Karabakh is international recognized as part of Azerbaijan. Has there been international support in favor of Armenian claims to the area? Are the Azerbaijani claims to the area also connected to the Azerbaijani population being displaced as a result of the first Nagorno-Karabakh war? And protests last week in Yerevan. What is the current position of Prime Minister Pashinyan? Okay, so starting with the first two questions, yes, Nagorno-Karabakh was always recognized as international recognized as part of Azerbaijan, but also there was also international recognition about the fact that the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh has the right for self-determination, and that was that recognition was supported by the work of the mediation group consisting of United States, Russia, and France, internationally recognized also by Armenia and Azerbaijan, to find a solution to the problem of Nagorno-Karabakh. So they were trying to help the both countries to find solution. Well, their efforts were not enough, and Azerbaijan considered that they failed, and Azerbaijan initiated war. And now, if you listen to their president, every time he mentions that the international community was not able to ensure the territorial integrity of Azerbaijan, and therefore they launched this military offensive, this war, to sort of liberate, in their understanding, liberate territories around Karabakh and the parts and Nagorno-Karabakh itself. So yes, I mean, there have been both, the territory has always been recognized, and we never had the support of international community to ensure recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh Republic, which is a self-declared, non-recognized republic. No one has recognized so far. But there also has been this understanding that the rights of people living in Nagorno-Karabakh have to be respected, and there should be found some way to ensure that internationally recognized Azerbaijani territory and the right to self-determination of Armenian people can be implemented simultaneously. This is a tough task and never was implemented. So that's the situation with regards to the Nagorno-Karabakh. Yes, and Azerbaijan has always been claiming that they want that their refugees and IDPs to return to these territories around Karabakh and Karabakh, proper Karabakh. And this has always been also on the negotiations table. All these negotiations that were happening between Armenia and Azerbaijan before the 2020 war, they were including questions such as the self-determination right of Karabakh, in other words, the status of the political status of Karabakh. There were issues about the return of all the IDPs and refugees to Karabakh, around Karabakh, to Azerbaijan also, the Armenian refugees and IDPs that were displaced from Azerbaijan. There were many other issues that were being discussed during the negotiations, but unfortunately, because of also the zero-sum mentality that I mentioned, that every time each of the parties wanted more and more, and they thought that time works for their own in favor of them. So they couldn't find a solution on this. And now Azerbaijan, since they have already gained control to some of the territories, they're actually organizing the return of some of their IDPs to the territories around Karabakh. And with respect to the protests last week in Yerevan, so there have been several different protests in Yerevan recently. There were protests against the government of Pashinyan, and because of the recent escalation, which took the lives of more than 200 Armenian servicemen and civilians. And there is this huge dissent among the public that we are sacrificing our, servicemen, our soldiers, our civilians also, and we're not getting anything in return. Well, at least if there is war and the people are dying, are being killed, are being murdered, but there is an expectation that at least something should be in return, which is not the case. And we are also in parallel to losing lives of people, we are also losing some territory, losing our sovereignty. So this raises a lot of dissent among the public, and there are protests against Pashinyan's government, because the people start thinking that their policies are not working as efficiently as to ensure the security of the people and also the sovereignty of Armenia. There are also other protests in Armenia, like I already mentioned about, that demand Armenia from Pashinyan's government to alter Armenia's foreign policy and change it from the direction of being a closest ally of Russia to have an opportunity also to engage with other countries and to seek support from other Western countries. And there are some political parties who demand Armenian government, Armenian prime minister in particular, to withdraw from this CSTO agreement, where Russian have a very dominant role, which will open opportunities for Armenia to also seek support elsewhere, military support, political support, economic support. So yeah, this is the situation with the domestic politics that our current government has to also encounter and take it seriously, because I have to also mention that Armenia is a young democracy, young parliamentarian democracy, and certain democratic practices are still being exercised in Armenia. And the visit of Nancy Pelosi last week to Armenia was pretty much clear that the message that she delivered, that the US will always be there to support democracy. So according to also the US, at least the US approach, Armenia is considered a democracy, and they would be happy to support democracy in this particular case if there is a need for any type of support. So one more question: does the Christian religion have anything to do with this war? No, it has basically nothing to do with this war. It is basically about historical antagonism and historically antagonistic relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan because of the claims over some territories. And we have to also understand that this war can be traced back at least 30 years or even further, like 100 years, when Armenia and Azerbaijan got their first independence in 1918, and then when they were taken over by the newly established USSR, and Soviet Union managed all these territorial and national issues because of their totalitarian approaches and mechanisms that they were using against the national minorities. And then all of a sudden, Soviet Union ceased to exist, and all of these countries started to raise the issue of territorial claims, the rights of people. The minorities were living in Azerbaijan, Armenian minority, Azeris were living in Armenia. So it was a complex situation, and every nation considered their right over certain territories. So the war now we are experiencing, we are witnessing, is the consequence of the post-Soviet colonialism and the inability of the member states of the Soviet Union to peacefully deal with the heritage that Soviet Union left after it was dismantled. So there were a lot of issues that different countries, not only in Armenia, Azerbaijan, if you study the post-Soviet political developments, you will see wars also in Georgia, about Abkhazia and South Ossetia. There have been violence, and still there is violence. Just last week also another war in Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. They are also fighting for some territory that they still have conflict about. There were conflicts also, well, obviously apparently in Ukraine, the Crimea, and other issues there. So in Yugoslavia, there were conflicts after the breakup of Soviet Union and Yugoslavia. So there were many. This is a historically ethno-political conflict, and this is the heritage, the negativity, the sort of a negative heritage that somehow we still have to deal with as a consequence of this demise of Soviet Union, and all of a sudden these independent republics, newly established republics, are facing such challenges. Okay, next question. The present political situation in Russia leads to an inflow of Russians in Armenia. Indeed. Could it be that Armenia may gain in geopolitical independence from Russia with the help of these international global-oriented Russian Armenians? Well, it's a difficult question. I'm not really sure that Armenia can gain in terms of geopolitical independence. What I can say that there have been, like I mentioned already, there have been thousands of Russian migrants in Armenia. More are coming because of the recent decree in Russia about mobilization. We can see the lines and the queues and the tickets of the prices going up, air tickets, etc., from Russia to Armenia. So there are more Russians coming, and this definitely has a very positive contribution for the Armenian economy. And Armenia is doing pretty well in the recent months, despite all the predictions that the economies of all the countries will collapse because of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions and everything, and because of close ties with the Russian economy that Armenia has, but also because of the Russian influx into Armenia of Russian very high-level professionals who bring also their expertise and who start paying taxes also in Armenia, etc. This is and spend their money in Armenia. This is having a positive impact on the Armenian economy. But I think that's the major positive consequence of this influx, and I don't see any connection there to gain geopolitically for Armenia. Okay, one more question. So is there positive news about the situation? I assume this is a situation between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There are both. I mean, there is information and there is this urgency by the international community, United States and Russia and everyone, urging the countries to meet again and to find solution to this difficult problem of the between Armenia and Azerbaijan. There is also right now, as we speak, there is the UN General Assembly meetings sessions resuming soon. And our Prime Minister is going to have a speech there, I think today or maybe tomorrow. So there will be more information from him for us to understand where we are in terms of negotiations and whether we can expect more peaceful solutions to the conflict with the support of the mediation of the Americans or others. But there is also, we can see also news that every morning there is information from the Ministry of Defense of Armenia indicating that the situation has not changed on the borders, which means not change means there is still a risk for the resumption of violence and the hostilities. So we should just wait and see what is going on and how much humanity and morality will take over aggression and hostilities. And we all hope that there will be some opportunities for the leaders to find some common ground and continue the negotiations with some concessions and compromises, but not allowing or preventing further escalation. Is the Middle East or Israel able to help? Well, I'm not sure about this Middle East. It's a very broad region. If I don't think there is any chance for any Middle Eastern country to be to practically help Armenia in this situation. With regards to Israel, again, I think on the opposite, Israel has been supplying Azerbaijan heavily with the military equipment, and this has been an issue also in Armenian-Israeli relations that Armenian officials have always been raising against Israel, that why are they selling so much weapons, fatal weapons like the UAVs, etc., to Azerbaijan, which then eventually are used against Armenians. And we don't even have diplomatic relations with Israel in terms of embassies and consulates, which we only managed to establish these relations a couple of years ago. And these relations have to continue, flourishing, because they are just very minimum relationship that we have with Israel. And maybe one last question: what do you think are the most commonly misunderstood dynamics of Armenia by non-Armenians, so we can better appreciate the country's realities? That's a very important question. I think there is a lot of misperception about Armenia from among the diaspora Armenians and people who are living outside of Armenia. And there have been always other issues that were important from the diaspora standpoint and perspective, such as the Armenian genocide issue, which is a very important issue. But if we are starting to find some solutions to the conflict that we're with Turkey and Azerbaijan, we have to understand that security comes first, and ensuring the security of Armenian people and independence and sovereignty of Armenia are key today for the remaining people living in Armenia, the 3 million people living in Armenia. So obviously, Armenian genocide issue is a significant human rights issue, and the denial of Turkey of that fact of genocide is completely against all international norms and law. However, we cannot start building a relationship with Turkey if we are starting from the major issue of Armenian genocide. We will end nowhere, and therefore what would be really good for also people living outside Armenia, Armenians living outside Armenia, realize the existential threats Armenia is experiencing today, and support to overcome all these existential threats by normalizing relations with our neighbors in order to ensure development and peace and sustainability for Armenia. And only afterwards there will be an opportunity for us to engage in not less important topics such as the Armenian genocide. What books would you recommend to get started to better understand Armenian history and culture? There are plenty, but one book that I definitely recommend to understand the recent history of Armenia is Jirai Liparidyan's book on Armenia. If you just search Liparidyan, you will see a book, Modern Armenia, which is a book about the Armenia in post-Soviet Armenia from 1991, and to better understand also the specificities of the conflict with Azerbaijan over Nagorno-Karabakh, I'd recommend Thomas de Waal's book, Black Garden. Okay, one last question that I can see, and probably we will need to stop there. Historically, West has never meaningfully supported any country unless they have something to benefit from. What Armenia can offer to the West in terms of material or political gains? That's also a good question. There is not much Armenia can offer apart from fledgling democracy that we're trying to continue building and being a reliable partner as democracy in this region. One other thing is that also historically, the Western approach towards this region has been to balance Russian influence and not to allow Russia has a dominant presence in the region because of the importance also of the region in terms of geography, connecting different parts of the world, like Middle East and Europe to Asia, and all important routes going through also this region, and major energy resources. So I think there's pretty clear also interest from the Western countries, not in particular United States, to reintroduce or re-engage in the region, and also try to support one of the few democracies in the region and the wider region, not only South Caucasus. Okay, thank you very much for your interest and for your very, very interesting questions. There is a lot. I'm sure that you would still be interested to learn about Armenia, but maybe we will have other opportunities. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope it was useful.